Hello and welcome back to Mid-Range Tech Reviews. Today I'm going to be covering something I wrote up on my blog a few days ago about what we may be expecting from the next generation of console hardware, specifically regarding the quantity of memory. Now, Moore's Law is Dead has been covering this for around the last half a year, and I'll put links in the description to some of those videos. But to sum it all up, the leaks that have been put out are that the Xbox will have up to 48 gigabytes of memory, and the PlayStation will have 30 to 40 gigabytes of memory. The problem I have with these leaks is that there are two things that are required to achieve those numbers. The first one is that both consoles will need to be using 4 gigabytes, which is 32 gigabit memory modules. And the second thing is that based on the leaked memory controller configurations, both consoles would need to use a clamshell design, which is what we call the clamshell design. Let's start with the 4 gigabyte modules. First up, when I've been searching through the various news outlets, there are no releases from the big three memory manufacturers. That's SK Hynix, Samsung and Micron. There's no official announcements of such a module existing. There's no spin-up announcements, no first off the line, no sampling, nothing. We have a leaked roadmap for AI applications that does show the production of these modules starting around the end of Q1 2026. That's within the next month or so. A prior leaked roadmap that was leaked a year earlier didn't even have any of these listed. So this is a, let's say, aspiration from the company. Now, here's the thing. 3 gigabyte modules are also listed on those roadmaps, and they were listed as starting production from mid-2024, but we haven't even seen them on any consumer product yet, though that does appear to be about to change with the rumoured release of the RTX 5050 9 gigabytes variant. However, that's a 2-year lead time. We even had reports of 3 gigabyte chips beginning sampling back in November of 2025. Sampling is when the memory manufacturers send them out to businesses which are intending to buy and use them to make sure that they are compatible with the designs and stuff like that. Additionally, the only product announced to unofficially use this 4 gigabyte modules is the Nvidia Rubin CPX GPU, which was announced fairly recently and is not expected to be released at the very earliest until the end of 2026. So for me, the logic of 4 gigabyte modules even being available for use in a mass-produced consumer product towards the end of 2027 is not really making much sense. There's one more aspect for this as well. No gaming console has ever used the latest memory technology, whether that's capacity or speed. Seriously, I went back to the Xbox 360 and PS3 era, and each console was using 1 to 2 year old memory technology, and that technology had already appeared in other consumer products before that. So the simple argument is that consoles need a large amount of consistent supply, and usually from more than one manufacturer to ensure that supply. This is not normally achievable on the cutting edge of technology. Moving on to the clamshell design discussion, a clamshell is what we call when 2 memory modules are placed either side of a circuit board. Now, if we go back through the years once again to the Xbox 360 and PS3 era, we will find that only a single console out of all the ones released between now and that period of 2005-2006 used the clamshell design, and that was the PlayStation 4. All the other consoles don't use it. And the reason is complexity and cost. Doing clamshell designs requires adding more layers and complexity to the circuit board design, through having to avoid electrical crosstalk, but also ensuring that the electrical paths to the module pins is within the margin of error required for the timing. This is because the physical pins of the memory module is turned over and flipped to be on the opposite side of the circuit board, so they're physically not aligned. Yes, you can on GDDR7 remap the function of some of the pins, but not all of them. The other aspect of the clamshell design is heat dissipation. Now that you have two chips producing heat, and whereas before you would have had a heatsink on one side of the assembly, you now likely have to put one on both sides. You may even have to redesign the heatsink to account for the increased heat. And this could also impact the shape of the physical product itself. It's housing the circuit board and the modules. These all add costs to manufacture each individual console unit, and that's something which is typically avoided in consumer products because these products have relatively low margins. In fact, cost optimization is a big part of consumer products. We only have to look at the history of the console industry itself to see times when over-optimization was done. For example, the Xbox 360 famously could scratch discs because a 50-cent spacer was not included in the disk drive. And that was never addressed. They preferred to pay the people who were affected by replacing the discs, and that wasn't on every single game, or have people complain. That was the solution. So think about that. A 50-cent difference in cost was never addressed. And we're talking about something which would add, tens of dollars to the design. So what does that leave us? Well, if you look at the table I've put together, you can see that 2 GB and 3 GB memory modules are what are available to the manufacturers as of today. Due to the memory bus widths, i.e. how many memory controllers are included in the APU design, we're limited to 6 modules on the Xbox and 5 modules on the PlayStation. And that gives us a maximum of 18 GB and 15 GB capacity, respectively. I don't actually believe that PlayStation would regress in RAM capacity. Both Xbox Series X and PS5 have 16 GB of RAM. Now, for me, 18 GB itself is a reasonable increase for the next-gen Xbox. For the PlayStation, I could see them going down the route of how the PS4 Pro and PS5 Pro are constructed. They have a separate pool of slower memory for the operating system. While that's not in any of the leaked information so far, I find it more probable than including a massive excess of memory that won't be used for anything. So yes, going with 24, 36, 30 or 40 GB of memory on a console device is really quite a lot, a huge increase, which games basically wouldn't really utilise. We only have to look at games on PC which are running at higher resolutions with higher settings and more features which take up large quantities of VRAM, and we're still within the 17 to 18 GB range. Consoles will be upscaling from around 1080p resolution. They won't be doing, or probably shouldn't be doing, 4K resolution native as a rendering output. So they shouldn't be using so much memory if they're being optimized. Bear in mind that the PC market won't disappear as well, and existing consoles will also be around and catered to. There will be a cross-gen period. So there isn't really any reason for developers to use double what they currently are. We've never seen a transition like that in the modern era of game design. So what else could the memory be used for? The proposition from leakers like Moore's Law is dead is that both consoles will be making heavy use of AI. However, I've performed several informal tests running 2 different types of AI workload in parallel with a game, and the performance hit is absolutely destructive to performance. The issue is that AI uses a lot of memory bandwidth and also compute resources. On both consoles, memory bandwidth will be heavily impacted by running even small AI models and will affect the rendering performance of any game. For PlayStation, that also runs into problems with the AI consuming a large portion of the GPU compute performance and cache occupancy. That will probably result in bottlenecks, stalls, and cache misses for the rendering workloads. On the Xbox, the leaks suggest the presence of an NPU, but this NPU is quite weak. My RX 9060 XT is over double the int8 tops. But let's assume that the GPU compute resources are not impacted. This still leaves the effect on the memory bandwidth. So, in my imperfect testing, we can see a drop of 15 to 50% performance in FPS, depending on the game workload, just for concurrently running an AI chatbot. That's not a small hit to performance. The problem will also be that this is not a constant performance hit either. AI workloads are very bursty, they stop and start randomly, meaning that the system will be randomly hit and freed up during gameplay, causing a sort of roller coaster of available resources for the game to capitalize on. I don't think you can design a game around that. You need certainty of performance, certainty of resources, otherwise you'll be dealing with hiccups and frame rate drops all the time, and that's if you can avoid hard stutters. Are we really expecting AI to be working in a game? Yeah, I'm quite skeptical of this, and therefore I'm quite skeptical of the large quantities of memory being touted for these consoles. The memory needs to have a use case, or it won't be factored into the cost of the console. Now, yeah, I could be wrong, and I've certainly been wrong before, and these leaks exist for a reason. There's information out there coming from semi-official channels indicating that this is a plan. But we've also had leaks before where things were confused with development kits rather than the actual finished final console. So I would love for someone to give me a real justification as to how this would work. What workloads are really demanding double the current memory capacity in the consoles? I could see another third or 20%, but 100% more RAM or 80% more RAM? That's unlikely, at least from my point of view. So, thanks for listening today, and I hope to see you again in the future.